Hey everyone, welcome to the Village Films podcast. I'm Caleb and I'm joined as always by David Swanson. Today we are going to be talking about something that not a lot of people are talking about, which is streaming versus theatrical. This is just my opinion. I'm a filmmaker!
Are you guys videographers?
Who cares?
I was being sarcastic if you didn't catch that, because it's all people are talking about in our industry. And so this is something I feel like we talk about all the time with each other. So obviously in our business, and as you were talking about, we've grown up where there was no streaming. It was only theaters, and then streaming came on the scene. It wasn't very big. Now it's massive, and now it seems like there's this really big divide, and the whole thing is who's making money, how are they making money, why are these $200 million films going straight to streaming and no one hears about them and they're flopping, and why can't things adapt? And so
seems like the hardest thing is to monetize your film.
Yeah, so ChatGPT kind of spit out a couple of just points about it, but I think maybe we could just start with just talking about, which we've discussed before, how it was before streaming was like an actual place to put major blockbuster features, and it was just theatrical and then DVD revenue. Just talk about that, because that's how things were before, and it was a different model, and the DVD sales were like another wave. So explain that a little bit, I think.
Well, yeah, I think growing up, when you wanted to see a really great movie, you went to the theaters. And then, since streaming wasn't around, I think the lower base movies went to just television. They were like television movies, like Hallmark or something.
Sick.
Or like a network would produce a lower budget movie.
Or just go straight to DVD.
Or it would go straight to DVD, yeah. And so I think what happened with streaming is once they started making their own content, because at first streaming just licensed movies and existing TV shows, but now everyone's making their own original content. And it started, I think, with smaller budgets, like more in the 20, 30, 50 million range, which I guess for a big budget movie that's relatively low. But now they're making these crazy $250 million streaming movies, and it feels like it just gets lost in the mist of streaming.
I would say, though, I think it even started lower. It was 20, 30, 50 million. There's still a chance you could put that in theaters and it perform well now. I think it started even less than that. But then I feel like when the pandemic happened, I remember there was like a moment HBO Max started their thing where they put a movie out and then like a couple of weeks later it's on streaming. And I feel like when that happened, people were like, oh, well, I'll just wait and I'll just pay the, monthly thing. And now it's this thing of like you were just talking, and that perception of the film quality, because that movie you mentioned, Brad Pitt and
Wolves.
The Wolves with Brad Pitt and
George
Clooney, who were like
big
heavy hitters in Hollywood. So they would draw an audience. That movie, from the article you read, it was saying basically that massive budget, like $200 million, somewhere in the 150, 200 million. And it was actually originally supposed to have some kind of theatrical release. And that got completely basically just trashed, and it went straight to Apple, and basically no one watched it. It flopped on Rotten Tomatoes, which doesn't have a lot to do with the performance of it with revenue.
65%.
Yeah, but the perception of that film now is it went straight to streaming, so it's probably not like that quality that you want.
Well, most people never even heard about it.
Yeah,
you got Brad Pitt and George Clooney, and I watched the film because I love Brad Pitt and George Clooney as a dynamic duo. And like it reminded me of the old Oceans days, you know. And so I was like, oh, I bet this will be good. And I watched it, and I thought it was okay. But what sucked was no one saw it. No one
You would
heard
have seen
about
it in theaters too, though.
Yeah, I
I probably would have seen it if it had been in theaters.
I thought it was coming out in theaters in our area, and I had like planned a date night with my wife, and I was ready to go. And then on the day I thought it was coming out in theaters, it just showed up on Apple.
So obviously, from a convenience standpoint, you know, streaming is more convenient. But like, I'm so tired of hearing that because not everything needs to be convenient. Yeah. Like, we don't need to have a 5-course meal in 5 minutes. We don't need to have like everything at our fingertips. That's actually destroying our society. Just kidding. But
there is something.
Yeah. Well, that's what they say. So despite the streaming's convenience, theaters offer an immersive experience. And so I think that's part of it is like, you know, it's hard to quantify that, but like an immersive experience, and like it's a different experience with the theater. We talk about it all the time, being in the movie theater when Endgame came out and you see Captain America like actually finally pick up Thor's hammer.
And
everyone you're surrounded by like 300 other people, everyone's cheering. You will never get that in your living room, even if you invited 20 of your friends. It's not going to be the same. And so
it's a great moment to see complete strangers bonding over the same thing. And you don't get that at home. You don't get that when you're watching a new Netflix movie that costs $200 million.
Yeah.
This is how it goes. You're like, oh, there's a new movie on Netflix. You watch it, and at the end, you're like, oh, that's pretty good.
And then the next day, you might like ask someone like, hey, have you seen this? They're like, no. You're like, oh, go check it out. It's pretty good. That's it.
That's it. But when Dune 2 came out, I went and saw that in theaters 5 times. I went with 5 different sets of friends because I loved that movie so much.
Well, that was mainly because you have a huge crush on Timothée Chalamet, probably. So,
I mean,
we're not cutting that.
Silence! He's beautiful.
But that's a great point. These huge movies, and I don't think they have to be major blockbusters because Twisters.
But it helps.
Twisters was not like a super big blockbuster movie, but it was a smash hit. And so like Dune and the Barbenheimer thing, it's like when it's in the theaters and it has that buzz that's generating, and it sometimes can become like a meme or like a cultural phenomenon, it just drives more people to the theaters because people want to be a part of that. Yeah. And I think that can still happen. I don't know like why.
I think it really was the pandemic, man, because we used to go to the theaters all the time post-pandemic. And as soon as it happened, pre-pandemic, as soon as COVID happened, no one went to the theaters because it was all locked down. And then it's like, I feel like theaters are people are just now starting to go back, and that's still 4 or 5 years later.
Yeah. So the second thing they list is kind of like the financial side of it. So it's the revenue models and the just the financial viability. So, and this is what we were just talking about too. The streaming, they have a fixed cost because it's based on their subscription fees, and so they don't have box office sales. And they're basically saying this can be advantageous because it allows them to take in more creative risks and produce content that may not be a commercial hit. But the question is, there's no way, basically they can't measure the success. They can have the viewership, but there's no way for them to measure the financial or the revenue gain that they could have gotten. And that's what I was just saying is, you know, they didn't have to put that Brad Pitt movie straight onto their platform. That could have had a full theatrical release. Yeah. They could have just seen if the public was going to show up, and then it could have lived on their platform because it's going to be on the platform anyways.
And I think they've done that in the past too. Like there's
they have done
what's
it with
that
some
one
of them.
movie called with Henry Cavill? and gosh, it was Ron Howard's daughter. I forget her name. It was like
Ron.
a
Oh,
secret
Dallas
agent
Bryce
movie.
Howard.
It was like a secret agent movie or
Was that
something.
in theaters?
I want to say Argyle. That's what it's
Okay.
called.
Was that in theaters? Let's look it up live.
I think
Chat.
I think it did go and do a theatrical run, but it didn't do well in theaters.
It did hit theaters. But so then they say, for theatrical, obviously you have the box office performance, which has for the longest time been the primary measure of success. And major blockbusters often benefit from an exclusive theatrical release to maximize profits before moving to digital or streaming. Theaters generally yield higher per film revenues for studios compared to immediate streaming releases. And so that's obviously the whole thing of on the financial side is, you have this fixed revenue model with the streaming services and then the box office success. But I think what I keep saying is I think there's going to be some kind of blend because like Netflix could open a series of theaters and run a theatrical release for a film they own and they greenlit, and they could get both. They could get the box office, they could get, the streaming side. But it's yet to be determined if anyone wants to take a chance to do that.
I think I'll always be pro theaters versus streaming because I enjoy the experience when I go to the theater. But there's also like big cons when it comes to theatrical release movies is nowadays the budgets are so huge. It's like $200 million budget is like the new normal for a movie now. And so if you don't make what $500 million in your theatrical release, that's breaking even now.
Crazy.
Because they also are going to put 150 to 200 million in marketing.
But even now, like, especially Disney, and I think they have had to hit the brakes a little bit. Like these series, like Star Wars and a lot of their Marvel series, they are spending insane amounts of cash, and they're not getting a theatrical release. They're just trying to draw a subscriber base.
Yeah.
But if you just keep hemorrhaging money and you're not gaining enough subscribers to kind of like justify that, that's not sustainable. And that's what happened. They are slowing down on like their quantity and maybe hopefully trying to go for the quality aspect. But
I feel like it kind of is I think it was a mistake for them to start their own streaming service because all of the content that they were producing through the MCU and through the Star Wars that they had, all of those could have been theatrical release movies. Like they didn't have to make them into TV shows, I think, because like you look at The Mandalorian, it basically, what was it, 8 episodes, and they were like 30 minutes each. It was basically like a 3.5 hour movie that they could have condensed into a 2 hour movie, 2.5 hour movie.
yeah, but I think the series were fine, and that's actually when it was good. Mandalorian and WandaVision, some of the earlier ones, I think those were still well done. And the reason I think they justified doing their own streaming thing is because they own so much intellectual property. They own so much content that they know that if they grow it long enough, like just the amount of studios they own, they can put everything on their platform. But I think where they went wrong was, and I'm sure they're watching this right now and they care what we think. They make billions of dollars. When you try to, I think all of the streaming services do this. They want to gain a subscriber base so quick that they just think if they just put out a bunch of stuff, people will like just flock to it. And I think actually Apple's done the best job at not trying to go for quantity. Their stuff actually, they don't have as big a library, but I feel like more of their shows and movies are actually of a higher quality.
Yeah.
But I still think they could put some of their features in theaters. But
yeah,
that the thing we were talking about before, kind of like the perception, it says cultural impact and perception of film quality. And so there's like this whole conversation with streaming of like when a film runs straight to streaming, it sometimes is perceived as lesser than those that are given a theatrical run. Although this perception is changing as platforms like Netflix, Amazon, and Apple produce award-winning films, which is true. That is happening some, but like that movie that we were talking about with Ryan Reynolds and Gal Gadot and The Rock, like that had just this massive budget, and it was a fine film. It was just an action film, but like you just felt like it was okay. It was like
Well, I
it was like
wonder.
a meal, like you go to like a I don't know how to compare it to a meal because it's not fast food, but you're not like getting like a prime rib steak. It's just like fine. I
Well,
don't even
that's
know.
what's weird. The budget and the performance was like a steak dinner, but when you watch it in a streaming service, it's like you're going through the drive-through. And so I felt like it just kind of,
Yeah,
it
but I
just
think
feels
even if
wrong.
I had watched that in theaters, I still would have felt the same about it. Like it was an okay movie, but like it didn't make me feel anything. It was just like another. It was like Fast and Furious. Sorry
Dude,
to
how
insult
dare
you like
you?
that. Let's turn on the magnets and drive down the street and suck all the cars. Anyways,
Oh
so
my gosh.
another thing they list, there's like two more in here. So another thing is just the reaction of the industry. Obviously, titans like us reacting, and then guys like Christopher Nolan and Martin Scorsese, who we're very good friends with, and like we have their numbers and they're super tight. But like a lot of those guys that have really, really been very vocal about, and also Tom Cruise too. He's not a director, but they're big on like the art of the cinema and the cinema experience and like advocating for that, and they view it as like a very integral part of the movie industry. But what's funny is
They
Martin
obviously have some
Scorsese
bias in it.
put, yeah, well he was like that, but then he
Yeah.
did The Irishman that was like $250
Yeah.
million dollars,
Well, it's
which
because he said no studio would have ever backed that budget because the audience wasn't there. And that was like their justification for it never being greenlit. But then the streaming Netflix was like, oh, well, we can do that. And their biggest reason why they did that is because they wanted Martin Scorsese on their
yeah.
list of directors.
But I mean, and Christopher Nolan is not always the best example because he's like one of the most famous directors in the world. But he is definitely one of the guys that has never kind of bowed to that. All of his movies, they go into theaters, they have a full theatrical release, and for the most part, they have a lot of success. Even if you can't hear people talking like in Tenet, they still do decently well, and so the studios trust him, and so he's not gonna let a studio say, "Can we just do a 2 week
streaming
theatrical
service.
and then go to streaming?" He's not
Yeah.
going to bow to that because he knows that the experience of the theaters, and he gets people to go to theaters when he makes a good movie. And so we need more people that are kind of standing on that ground. And Tom Cruise the same way, because I think for Top Gun Maverick, there were actually conversations with, I can't remember the studio behind that, but they wanted to do kind of a simultaneous streaming thing, and he was basically like, we're not going to do that. And he
Yeah.
has enough kind of authority to say that. And it was Top Gun Maverick, and it ended up being a massive success. And it's because he knew you needed that experience in the theaters, and that's what happened. And so I don't really know where I was going to go with that, but I mean, that's basically, I mean, that's what it says, industry reactions. Like,
Yeah.
I think there are people on both sides, but I think the people that are making the films are the ones, for the most part, saying, hey, there's something to be said for, what happens in the theater, and we need to preserve that. And so this last thing is kind of what I was talking about, is this hybrid model, or like a middle ground where you have, theatrical short run and then streaming or something like that. But I think there's going to be something else that happens, and I don't really know what that is because I can't see the future, but something has to change because I don't think the theaters are going to go away.
No, I think the theaters are making a comeback, honestly. I think more people are starting to go back.
Well, and Gen Z, like we were just reading.
Yeah. So, yeah, because at first I thought, is this a generational thing too? Because I feel like the millennials, we're the last generation that basically went to the theaters and saw the birth of the streaming services. And
We
Gen
have that
Z
nostalgia
and Gen
with the theater.
Alpha, they're all born into that. They've never not known it. And so I was like, man, are they even going and watching movies at the theaters? But they are. They actually like the social engagement. That's where they
It's
can,
the experience.
yeah, the
The
experience.
article I was reading talked about like with Gen Z, there's like a priority for them on like the experiential side of life. So,
Mhm.
and that plays into it, with the theater because, going with your friends to the theater and, engaging in that way
Yeah.
is just different.
Yeah, I think it always comes down to the money. Like the movie industry, a multi-billion dollar industry, but there's so many different ways to monetize your film, and I feel like that's where it's coming to it's like it's kind of hurting us because there's so many different ways that there's not really a direct path anymore. It used to be you put your movie out in theaters and it goes into it goes into DVDs and you get another big push of sales on the DVDs. But then when digital and streaming came around, it changed everything. What was that one interview we watched with Matt Damon where he was like talking about
Yeah,
that?
he was talking about like, I think he was on Hot Ones, but he was talking about like when he used to make these films, he they make the film and get the DVD sales on the back end, which was a huge bump. But now that residual is gone. So he was basically saying, smaller films now that like, like
50, 70
a
million.
small, well, even smaller than that, but like in that range, like a niche kind of like romantic film about, some kind of love story. Those movies actually aren't getting made and put in theatrical because you can't take a chance on them anymore because they're not going to make any money. You're going to lose money. He is saying, with marketing in the end, I've got to make, upwards of 2, 3, 400 million dollars to actually make a profit. And
Hmm.
for movies sometimes that are like that, it's just not
There's
going to
not
happen.
enough demand to watch it. Yeah.
Well, I think for us, it's like, it's just good to know where things are right now and where they could be headed because if we ever, get the chance to make something that's even like 20 to 30 million dollars, like we would want a theatrical release. But
Yeah.
like,
But if Netflix called us and said,
oh
"Hey,
my
we have a
gosh,
$20 million
Netflix, we
budget,"
have got some fire ideas.
we're not going to say no either,
Yeah.
maybe.
Well, I think that's probably the challenge. If you're Christopher Nolan, okay, you can like not
Afford to
take
say no.
Netflix's call, but hey, guess what? Like we are not you. We're just trying to make movies, and if someone's gonna take a chance and let us make something, we're gonna take that chance.
Where I love content, or the type of content that I love on streaming are series. I love anime too. I do love anime. But like I think where streaming has been the most beneficial has been episodic releases. So like when Queen's Gambit came out, dude, that was like one of the best shows I've ever watched in my life. And I'm sure like back on like the network television. I mean, I guess I still do network television. I don't know who watches network television anymore, but I'm sure that they
Boomers.
could have produced something like that,
Well,
but
that's what I was about to say.
would
Is
they have taken a chance on
episodic
something?
episodic series are not a new thing. Like when Breaking Bad came out, it was on
Yeah.
AMC, and it
Mhm.
had a weekly episode, and it ran in seasons, and so like good television and good like content was still being made before streaming. I think it's just packaged a little differently now,
Mhm.
and it's made more. Instead of AMC maybe
Yeah.
having 3 shows, now Netflix can greenlight 50 different.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Is
Well,
that good? Because
it's
like if only 6 of those are worth watching.
well, it's also the fact that like you can watch it without ads and you can watch the whole season in one weekend if you wanted to. I think
Yeah.
that to me is maybe not great.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good thing or bad.
If someone texts you, it's like 3 a.m. You're like, I'm still watching this show. Yeah,
You crawl out of
definitely-
your bedroom
I
like on
definitely
Sunday
can't.
morning.
Control that part, but like, yeah, there are moments like me and Gabby are just watching Netflix, like we're watching a new show and it's like 2 a.m. and you're like, okay, maybe we should go to bed, but you got
Let's just watch
3
one
episodes
more.
left and you're like, we might as well just finish it.
No, you watch the whole thing. You need some discipline.
Yeah. So as indie filmmakers, trying to make money in this industry has been really difficult. So I remember when we first started our feature documentary, we had a bunch of conversations about how do we make money so that we can take that money and reinvest it into another film, and you just kind of repeat the model of that. And so for us as indie filmmakers, we were like, we're not going to get a theatrical release, because even if someone wanted to give us a
knew that
theatrical
from
release,
the get-go.
it would just be
Documentaries
too
don't go to
expensive. Yeah,
theaters.
it's not. No one's gonna go to the theater to watch a documentary. So we were like, okay, transactional video on demand, TVOD, that's our bread and butter. Because at first we were like, oh, if like Netflix or Hulu bought our film, that would be awesome. And then we found out that they'll probably
That doesn't
offer you
happen.
like 20 grand for
They'll
a year.
license it, yeah.
So the only model now for indie filmmakers is to basically get it on digital platforms like Amazon Prime, Apple TV Plus, where people can rent or purchase your film. And the only way to make money doing that is if you can market your film to a point where, hundreds of thousands or if even millions of people are purchasing your film.
And then the hope then is you make enough to reinvest in your next project, or you basically get recognition and notice to where someone that does have the money is willing to take a chance on your project.
On your next project.
And so that's kind of where we are. And that actually, kind of ties into, we have a whole another video where we talk about distribution. If you want to go watch that, go check it out now. We kind of break down, that whole process and what to look for, and especially as indie filmmakers, because, if you're Christopher Nolan, you're not worried about that. So I think that kind of wraps this up. I think we could talk a lot more about it, because this is such a hot topic right now, and it seems like it's constantly changing, with the strikes and how all that happened, and basically moving that ad revenue sharing from the television side, because the writers started to not make money from streaming. And so
we haven't even talked about when it comes to like YouTube monetization and streaming and other social media platforms. Like, there's so many ways to make money now off of video content. It just, you really have to be adaptable.
Like 80 to 90% of content, like across digital and social media platforms, is like video based. So like, I mean, that
it's
says
not
it
going
right there.
away.
Yeah, it's only getting bigger. And so that kind of wraps it up, I think, on this conversation. So if you guys think anything we said was stupid or dumb, please get in the comments and argue with us, and
roast us.
I will definitely reply and get mad at you probably. But if you enjoyed this, or if you didn't enjoy it, like, subscribe, and comment, and we will catch you guys in the next video.